I think we can start now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are, dear colleagues, and welcome to our second webinar in Topics in National Bibliography, a virtual event series brought to you by the IFLA Bibliography section. My name is Rehab. I work at the Bibliotheca Alexandrina in Egypt. I'm the chair of the Bibliography section, and I'm delighted to be your host today. So to make sure everything is okay, we start by sharing the screen first. And then we go immediately into our webinar. Moment. That's so our theme for today is National Bibliographies, Wider Perspective. And it's the second in our virtual event series. And as our first webinar has focused on delving into the practicalities of establishing and operating national bibliographies, our today's webinar is trying to explore wider perspective for national bibliographies. So in this webinar, we'll see extended views about national bibliographies, providing us with valuable insight beyond simply recording the national cultural output. National bibliographies offer more than just a list of countries' publications. They can uncover new trends, shed light on the reason behind their creation, what are the best choices for establishing and capturing the national output, and they can also show us how they fit into a larger information landscape. Before we go further into our presentation of the webinar, let's do some housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded, and we make the recording available on our website and on our YouTube channel. Your microphones have been muted for this event. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat box. But for we strongly advise that you use the Q&A box, so your question don't get lost among the chat and the greetings that can be very few in the chat. If you wish to use the closed captioning, so you can follow if English is not your native language, we advise you to use the English for the closed captioning, so you will have an English transcription of what is heard. So it will allow you to follow with us. Our program for today in this webinar will explore the fascinating world of national bibliographies within a specific cultural, regional, or national setting, whether we look at them individually or as a group, and the different presentation will allow us to see interesting connections and influences. We have today in our program three distinct presentations about retrospective bibliographies, about the legal framework for establishing a national bibliography, and about maybe the national bibliography when it is in a broader information landscape, like in cooperative cataloging or virtual or union catalog. And we end after this three presentation with a panel discussion. And in this panel discussion, I'll be joined by Maud Henri and Isabel Ayers, who are respectively the secretary and the information coordinator of the ICLA bibliography section. Maud Henri is the a metadata librarian in the information agency of the National Library of Belgium, KBR, and Isabel Ayers is lecturer at the Sao Paulo School of Sociology and Politics Foundations in Brazil, and myself. And before to go presenting our first speaker, I must thank our team, organizing team of this webinar. So Maud and Isabel as for the organizing team, and also with us as moderators and panelists, Rebecca Higgins, who is the chair of the working group maintaining the National Bibliographic Register in the bibliography section, and Andrew Lampert, who is supporting us from the backstage. So I will stop now sharing my screen to start presenting our first presentation for today. Okay, our first presentation for today. Collaborative projects in the field of national bibliographies highlight the importance of national and regional cooperation in safeguarding cultural heritage and ensuring a comprehensive record of the national and regional intellectual output across time. So what if these national bibliographies are time travel and they are retrospective? That is what we are going to hear from our first presenter, who is Marian Lefferts, and I invite her to join me on the screen here. And Marian is the executive manager at the Consortium of European Research Libraries. He has an MA in English Language and Literature and in Medieval Studies from the University of Groningen. And she worked on the International Medieval Bibliography in Leeds and the Illustrated Incommunicabilia short title catalog for primary source media. So it's strongly related to the theme of retrospective bibliographies. And Marian also takes part in the Labor Working Group for Digital Humanities and Digital Cultural Heritage, and sits on the selection committee for Digital Humanities for this year. Marian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me at this presentation, at the series of seminars. I'm very happy to be here in such a firmly established connection to the retrospective bibliographies that I will talk about today. So sharing my screen. So my name is Marian Lefferts, and today I will talk to you about the Census of European Retrospective National Bibliographies at CERL. First, for those of you who do not know what CERL is the Consortium of European Research Libraries. It is a member organization, which means that we do not get subsidies and we rarely have project funding. The money is paid for by the libraries. There are currently about 292 libraries affiliated in some way to CERL. And as an organization, we are a network of specialists. We have 10 working groups, an extensive program of events. We have publications, and but in addition to a network of specialists, we're also a hub for data. and that is what I will show on the next slide. Much more on our website. Follow us on Twitter if that's still allowed, and the blog I highly recommend. So data at CERL. CERL focuses on data that is about early printed books and manuscripts. We relate ourselves to European cultural heritage, print heritage, and we finish at around the middle of the 19th century, pre-1830. Our data is all freely available, and it's a combination of bibliographical records, authority records, structured descriptions of provenance information, and digital images of provenance evidence. Today, with you, I would like to look at the work that the CERL Working Group for Retrospective National Bibliographies has been doing, and the URL is on your screen. We will look at the results of the working group to date, and they happen to all be with a C: Census, Conference, Considerations, and our conference proceedings. And finally, I would like to look at the impact of the working group on CERL as an organization. Let's first start with a little bit of a definition. What is a retrospective national bibliography? I quite like to start at the end, so in reverse order. A bibliography, for this purpose, we say it's a list of details of printed books. We describe the who, the what, the where, the when, and a number of other details. National is typically a retrospective national bibliography is for books produced in a certain country. And retrospective in this context means that we look back at imprint history, at early imprints. And usually that is the first book that was printed in the country, and then going forward to whatever the cutoff date is that is decided for the bibliography, and that varies. So it is not dealing with books that are published today. Within CERL, one of our 10 working groups is for the retrospective national bibliography. It's a relatively young working group. It was set up in 2022. Its remit is to monitor and foster the role and impact of RNBs in the context of one of our databases, the Heritage of the Printed Book database, and I'll tell you more about it later on. And we also want to look at the role and impact of RNB when they are separate databases hosted by CERL. And we have two of those at the moment, the incunabula short title catalog on the left and the short title catalog Netherlands on the right. The incunabula short title catalog is maintained by the British Library and is for incunables, so the beginning of printing till 1500. The short title catalog Netherlands is the national bibliography of the Netherlands, and it goes till the year 1801. The other half of our remit is to define the role and impact of CERL when we come to communicate with RNBs. And we want to look at want to promote the role of retrospective national bibliographies in the world of linked open data and research infrastructures. And here we are looking at the role of identifiers, of linking, of authority records, that sort of thing. And finally, but not last and not least important one, is to promote the role of retrospective national bibliographies in cooperation with IFLA, who itself was at the beginning of this whole process of looking at national bibliographies, and they have a register of national bibliographies. On the left, you see their list, and I've clicked on one, the German one, and the detailed here on the Deutsche Nationalbibliographie. We said we would look at the results of the working group, and I'm going to start with the census. In the working group for CERL working group for retrospective national bibliographies, we had the good fortune of being supported by two people who were funded by CERL grantees. The one was Olga Ktachuk from the Ossolineum in Wrocław, and the other Jana Algarvio from the University of Toronto in Canada. And both of them looked at European countries, and contacted a lot of colleagues to find out the status of the retrospective national bibliography in that country. The list is created by those two, but it is a work of progress. We have contacted most countries, but there is scope for adding more details and refining the information that we have gathered. From the very beginning, the focus of this census, this list, was, is the retrospective national bibliography online? And I will talk about that a little bit more, why we asked that question. And the joyful secondary result of producing this list, that we established many, many new contacts with colleagues throughout Europe who are working on retrospective national bibliographies. The question we are now asking ourselves as a working group is, could we turn this information that we have gathered into a searchable resource, a database? And a group of us within the working group is looking at a potential data model for this. This is our list. On the screen, you see a whole long list at the top, with starting with Albania and ending with Wales and Pan-European. For each of those countries, we've got a little block here. Under Albania, the first lemma is that there is no electronic database. We have identified people who are working on it and found a responsible institution and the starting date. And then there is an attachment, a file where it gives you some further details. Also information about printed bibliographies that are retrospective bibliographies, and that may one day be turned into electronic resources as the future goes. So on the left, you see the URL for that list of databases, list of retrospective national bibliographies in Europe. If you see this list and examine it for your country and find that you would like to add or change, then please feel free to contact me and I can make the necessary changes. When we were looking at creating this list and meeting all these wonderful colleagues throughout Europe, the working group began to feel that it would be good to bring these people together and organize a conference on the topic. And we did that last year. It was hosted by the Ossolineum. It took place almost precisely 1 year ago. And the program and the slides are available online, and you see the URL on your screen. We had 17 speakers from 11 European countries, and the keynote was presented by Marieke van Delft, who is now retired from the Royal Library, the National Library of the Netherlands. And her title was Retrospective National Bibliographies in Historical and International Perspective. In this paper, she also draws great attention to all the hard work that IFLA has done in this respect. At the end of the conference, we had a number of, our heads were buzzing and spinning, and we had a number of considerations, but we also determined that the next conference, and there will be a next one, should be on liaising with researchers and talk about the reuse of the data that is gathered in these national bibliographies. So when our heads were buzzing, we came to talk about a lot of things during the conference, and one of the words was the title around the issue of national. As we are talking about historical print culture, you can imagine that the boundaries in Europe have changed frequently and a lot. And how does that align with the way the work is now often organized, which is on a national level, either by the National Library or by a special institute, and which boundaries do we then adhere to? Do we even call it national? Was a topic that was discussed. And we were wondering about retrospective. Is that too backward looking? Should we perhaps call it historical? And we're sticking with the term retrospective national bibliographies. And then we came to talk about the varieties of retrospective national bibliographies that are out there. There are hugely varying definitions of the territorial imprint, so the area that you cover. that sort of material that you cover in terms of format. So do you include newspapers? Do you include broadsheets? Then the method of printing, there are a variety of definitions out there in the various European countries, whether you include engravings, for example, or not. Then there may be definitions of parameters of the sort of type that you include, Cyrillic, Hebrew, Greek, Arabic. Also, a long discussion ensued about whether you include translations. So if there is a Dutch poem and it's translated into French, does it go into the Dutch National Bibliography, for example? And there are retrospective national bibliographies that do, and some that don't include materials about their territory, about their culture. And some of them include books by national authors, but well, then they weren't in the country. So somebody might be Austrian and working from France. Is it included in the bibliography or not? And due to a large number of historical reasons and our interesting history in Europe, time frame is actually an issue as well. We cannot say that it will start in the incunabula period and it will end in 1850 or the middle of the century, which is the CERL framework. It depends on when was the first book printed in your country. Is there a change in governance or boundaries or geographical location that you would like to reflect in your bibliography? So those are choices that you make. And finally, for me, the biggest takeaway from the conference was the source of the records. So there's a number of traditions and building blocks. We will publish these proceedings with the support of the Polish Lankoronsky Foundation. It's published by Harasowicz. And here you see the countries that will be covered in this publication, about 12, 14 of them. The impact on CERL. So what is the current situation? What would be nice to offer our users and what would we need for that? So we have data in two places, in the Heritage of the Printed Book database, where we aggregate files with bibliographic. It's a combination of catalog records and bibliographical records. We have a hosting environment where there are data sets developed by CERL. And in that same environment, we can host data sets such as the incunabula short title catalog and the short title catalog. And this is proving popular. So colleagues at the ESTC, a Polish provenance group, and Zurich Imprints have also asked us to host data. And we have a digital archive, which helps you to record images of provenance information. So from that, it's clear that the ISTC and the SCCN are both in the HPB and hosted as standalone databases. The VD16 is in the Heritage of the Printed Book database, and because we have it there and we have record ID numbers, we are able to connect records from libraries to the VD16 record, which is also in the HPB, and group them together, which helps us to structure the Heritage of the Printed Book database. So our reflections are, if catalog records include this record identifier from a retrospective national bibliography, we can actually connect the catalog and the bibliographical record in our digital world. And we would like that. We would like to expand the grouping of records in the HPB. We would like to include retrospective national bibliographies in our data set. And we are therefore keen to encourage libraries to include the references, permanent IDs to bibliographies in your records and contribute the records to the HPB so that we can give a joined up presentation of our cultural heritage. The databases that are hosted at CERL in AMPL serve a different purpose. There you can edit and add to the data sets, and therefore the two situations can coexist. As you can see, it's a patchwork, but a beautiful one. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marian. Thank you so much for this very insightful presentation about retrospective national bibliographies in the European continent, and also about the work, the very organized and really ambitious, also forward-thinking work of the working group on retrospective national bibliographies in CERL. I thank you, and I now pass to our second presentation for today, where we will learn about the theoretical framework of the legal deposit concept and its implication on the national bibliography and on preserving and capturing countries' cultural output. And what maybe we'll learn also some lesson about what a good legal deposit legislation is supposed to include to achieve its mandate and those of the National Bibliographic Agency. So our next presenter for this presentation will be Sandra Gisela Martin. And Sandra is, I must present her as primary as member of the bibliography section. So she is our colleague and she's contributing to the work of the bibliography section, but her career is really academic. She holds a PhD in library and library science and documentation from the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, and a master's degree in digital documentation. And she has been director of the library system of the Catholic University of Cordoba since 2003. She is professor of the subject of information sources and services, information system, and she teaches at the postgraduate level in several doctoral and master program, and she is also an external consultant for the National Commission for University Evaluation and Accreditation in the area of libraries. Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rehab. So I am going to share my slides. Okay. This work is part of my doctoral thesis. So the objective was to understand and interpret the legislation of legal deposit in Latin American countries that are members of ABINIA, excluding Spain and Portugal, in order to establish a critical state of the art on the situation. The methodology was documentary research, comparative content analysis, and the hermeneutic reading of the texts that were applied, exhaustive search of the different legislation, and comparative tables with categories and variables. The following categories were taken of all of these authors, and other categories that have emerging from the reading and analysis of both the bibliography and the legislation of each country. A content analysis guide was designed with 10 criteria and 23 variables. The theoretical framework of the work was based in the general system theory and covers national libraries, legal deposit, national bibliographies, identifiers, documentary heritage as part of the universal bibliographic control. The legal deposit constitutes an important instrument that assists national library. And I focus in the guidelines issued by recognized organizations, and I review all of the literature on studies carried out on the state of the art at the regional level. These are some of the guidelines, and these are the state of the art at regional level. The results was presented in the 10 criteria and the 23 categories or variables. Now I am going to explain each of them. Legislation, the number and the year of the law and decree and the title of the legislation. The subject, if was legal deposit, copyright, or book promotion. Type of legislation, law or decree, and the charter, voluntary agreements, specific law, or within another law, such as copyright law, national library law, or publishing market law. Criteria 2, conceptual framework, the definition of legal deposit, objectives, mission and purpose of the legal deposit, a definition of the commentary cultural heritage, definition of the types of documents, and complementary definitions such as publisher, authors, editors, and so on. Criteria 2 was about responsible. 9, the obligatory nature and the depositors, authors, publishers, producers, printers, and distributors. 10, the entity in charge of the legal depositor. And 11, the depository institutions, such as national archives, national libraries, parliamentary libraries, or university libraries. Criteria 4 was about content and format, and the variable 12, type of content included text, image, sound, audiovisual, and multimedia. And here in the table, you can see in the first column works, then the literary genre, content type, that is expression, type of documents, and media type or format, that is manifestation. Criteria 4, content and format, and the variable 13, exclusion. What type of document that are not complemented for the legal deposit. Then, criteria 5, scope, the territoriality and the nationality. Here we can find works by national authors published in the country, works by national authors published abroad, translated work of national authors published in the country or abroad, works by foreign authors published in the country, and finally, works for foreign authors published abroad that speak of the country. Criteria 6, quantity and term, the number of copies or the number of simultaneous accesses or users in case of digital publications, the deadline of the deposit, and in criteria 7, dissemination of the legal deposit, like listing, catalogs, national bibliography, or bulletins. Then, in criteria 8, we analyze the benefits or compensation, the controls carried out for compliance, and the contemplation of fines or sanctions in events of non-compliance. Criteria 9, copies for preservation, the right to reproduction for preservation purposes. And criteria 10, mention of the legal digital deposit. The conclusion, some of the conclusions. The need, on one hand, to rethink about the theoretical dimension and conceptualization and scope of the documentary heritage, and the other, to question the visions and missions of National Library. Legal deposits, dependence of the International Standard Book Number. That is documentary heritage. Emphasis on bibliographic documentary heritage. Vagueness and legal vacuum. Weakness in the conceptual framework of the laws. Weak linkage between legal deposit and national bibliographies. Needs to include the right of reproduction for preservation purpose and need to include digital legal deposit. Many open access publications are not covered by legal deposit because they are published only under the Creative Commons licenses and do not have international standard book number. For this reason, it can be said that the legal deposit does not represent the totality of the country's documentary heritage. There is a lack of precision of the subject in many aspects of the legal deposit in the legislation's analysis. This is possibly due to the fact that only 6 countries have exclusive legislation on the subject. The content referring to legal deposit is very brief and incomplete, which demonstrates the need for the library community to become involved in the preparation and presentation of updating projects or new legislation. A major weakness was found in the conceptual framework of the law. The definition of the meaning of the term used in the legislation favors the understanding of the scopes about an ambitious interpretations and in turn facilitates the application of the legislation. This situation shows the scarce links between the legislation on legal deposit and national bibliographies. On the other hand, although legal deposit is mandatory, the same is not true for the preparation of national bibliographies, which are only mentioned as a means of dissemination in a very basic and imprecise manner, without specifying who should prepare them and whether they are mandatory. It is striking that only 3 countries define documentary cultural heritage in their legislation. A great deal of confusion was found when listing works, documents, and formats. In other words, the FRBR entities, given that mentions of work, expression, and manifestation are intertwined. There is a legal vacuum in relation to the specific functions that the institution in charge of the management and the depository entities the legal deposit must perform to ensure that the law is complied. In the absence of a specific description, the problem arises to ensure that all processes of the repository are carried out, which should be not limited to the registration and assignment of the number and the storage documents, but there are many tasks and activities that need to be described in the law so that they can be carried out by the institutions involved. The type of context, works subject to the legal deposit included in the legislation is closely related to the conceptual framework. There is a lack of uniformity in the criteria for the categorizing them and a lack of precision and differentiation between works, literacy, genres, type of contents, expressions, type of documents, and type of storage media or formats, the manifestations. In the case of territoriality, the most frequent options are publications produced abroad by national or foreign publishers but circulating in the country, and works by national about authors published abroad. In the national option, all legislation contemplates works by national or foreign authors published in the country, but some countries consider works by national authors published abroad and works by foreign authors published abroad but related to the country or about the country. The legal scope is including works produced abroad makes it difficult to trace them, to identify them, and in many cases to acquire them. And not only that, but also the absence of responsibility as to who, how, and when this function should be performed. On the other hand, the question arises as to whether this requirement has ever been complied with, whether any country is currently complying with it, or whether it will be feasible to comply with it in the future. On one half of the countries complemented dissemination mechanisms in their legislation, and only 4 of them refer to national bibliographies. At the same time, it was also noted that the legislation do not yet contemplate the possibility of dissemination in the form of open linking data, perhaps due to the antiquity of many of the laws, but this dissemination alternative was not included in the newer legislation in the case of Peru and Mexico. So, the last aspect to be pointing out about the legal deposit is about the general and lack details of the format, medium, form of deposit, and form of access. Therefore, it can be stated that the current legislation are not designed or adequate for the legal deposit, an aspect that should be on the agenda for future modifications. Particularities are legal deposit has its own identity and is not only associated with copyright. Ensuring long-term preservation is one of the main functions of legal deposits, since copyright law make impossible to copy, migrate, or reproduce works. Problems inherent to physical preservation, plus the complexity of digital preservation. Some needs. Broaden the scope of legal deposit to include other types of documentary heritage. Discuss the role of national libraries in relation to legal deposit. Availability of technological infrastructures with hardware and software resources. And finally, it is important to emphasize that legal deposit is one of the basic instruments for achieving the universal bibliographic control. Perhaps with a leading role and with a commitment of library organizations, it could be possible to promote the reform of legal deposit legislation to bring it into the line with the current reality. So, and finally, I want to share with you the article published in the Informatio Journal about this work. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And if you want to have access to the article designated by Sandra. You can go on the blog of the bibliography section. There is a link there. There is an abstract in English and a link leading you to the full study, which we have concluded that this detailed research really lead us into what could be the potential reason why any country or national library is not capturing the full or the important part of its cultural heritage. Thank you, Sandra. And our last presentation for today. For a last presentation, the case when the national bibliography is integrated into a wider portfolio of bibliographic services like the National Union Catalog or a cooperative cataloging network. That's the subject of our next presentation, how this cooperation or integration between the network, the cooperative cataloging network and the national bibliography shape the national bibliographic landscape is explored. And we have three presenters, three co-author and one presenter. We have Anna Carolina Simionato, Arakaki, we have Amanda Nunes Soares, and we have Josina da Silva Vieira, and our presenter. The three of them, they are working at the Bibliography Service at the Brazilian Institute of Information in Science and Technology, ABIC. And also we are joined also by Anna Carolina, who is the coordinator of the bibliographic service at this institution. And Amanda is currently a researcher at the ABIC, at the Brazilian Institute of Information in Science Technology. And all they have substantive work and research also in the collective bibliographic catalog, cooperative cataloging, free software, link data, AI, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rehab. I'm gonna share my screen. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here at this webinar representing Brazil and our national bibliography. Today, I'm presenting more about Bibliodata and how we can support the national bibliography in Brazil. I will start with a brief history of Bibliodata, then talk more about national bibliography in Brazil, provide data and information, talk about main activities, obstacles and solutions, future plans, and conclusions. Bibliodata is a cooperative network established in 1942, initially as a local automated system, but due to its success, it turned into a nationwide system. Since 2013, it has been managed by the Brazilian Institute of Information Science and Technology, also known as ABIC, which is a Brazilian research unit under the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Bibliodata was planned to promote collaboration and ensures effective bibliographic control. It improves standardization and cooperation in cataloging. It also promotes dissemination of national collections and encourages interaction within the field. And most importantly, it has a major contribution to the national bibliography in Brazil. The Brazilian National Library is responsible for the national bibliography through the legal deposit law. This law established the mandatory submission of at least one copy of all publications produced in the national territory. This law is regulated by two other laws, one for monographic materials and other for musical materials. And it also ensures the registration and storage of national intellectual production, thus preserving also the Brazilian national language and culture. The National Library prepares and disseminates the current Brazilian bibliography through online catalogs. So ABIC and the National Library has a large number of partnerships in the field of library science and information. And due to its national reach, Bibliodata stores bibliographic data from a large number of Brazilian institutions, research centers, and information centers, and it's widely used for importing and exporting metadata. So it is a relevant source of bibliographic data at a national level. The National Library has the benefit of access to a massive database of verified bibliographic information that preserves the memory of the Brazilian national production. Here you can see the types of libraries that compose Bibliodata, with an emphasis on the federal public libraries and specialized libraries. So Bibliodata is composed with more than 150 libraries all over the country. Here you can see a map of Brazil with the number of recorded publications in Bibliodata by state and federal unit, and highlighting the southeast region of the country with Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, and Minas Gerais concentrating combined the majority of records with more than 2 million records together. Now, talking about Bibliodata activities, it has a significant impact to contribute with the Brazilian national bibliography as an important source of bibliography data. And also it is responsible for making a national collective catalog with integrated search of libraries collections that are part of this cooperative network. Also, it's responsible to develop products and services that explore and maximize the use of shared bibliographic resources. Other activities are developing methodologies and procedures for the automated process of documented data in accordance with national and international standards to facilitate cooperation, access, and use in Brazil. Also contributing to technological development. And lastly, promoting professional training initiatives in the field of information. Bibliodata faced numerous obstacles over time, like the system had been offline since 2013. Moreover, the website infrastructure did not support the new metadata standards. Also, the Brazilian institute had insufficient budget, lack of investment, or qualified professionals. So it became hard to manage large volumes of data and to adapt it to evolving metadata standards. As an effort to solve these obstacles, it resulted in the PNX project, which is a massive initiative formed by different professionals, such as librarians and an IT team, aiming to modernize, update, and deploy a new Bibliodata system with a new website, more funding, and qualified professionals, adapting to new standards and large volumes of data. In the late 20th century, when the Bibliodata system was operating at full steam ahead, it was a very influential model for bibliographic standardization in Brazil and also for other Latin American countries. So in addition to recovering its previous importance and capacity, and also by sharing our experience and practices, Bibliodata strives to continually improve access to Brazilian metadata on a global scale. For plans for the near future include first, bring the system back online this year. Also, updating the bibliography descriptions with RDA at the national level, which is still something distant from the reality of Brazilian libraries. And also create an ontology model integrated with other services offered in the library catalog. And finally, integrating portals and semantic language among the library participated in Bibliodata. In conclusion, Bibliodata and the national bibliography has a similar goal, to preserve the memory of the Brazilian national production, and also consequently preserving the Brazilian national language and culture. So Bibliodata can be an important and relevant source of verified and standardized bibliographic information about metadata in Brazil. And here are our contacts. And if you have any questions, you can send us an email or share with us here at this webinar. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Amanda and Anna and Josina also for this important presentation that really recall the very important theme of the due link and the cooperation between union catalog and cooperative cataloging and the national library in one country. You stay with us here, and I must call on our first presenters. You all come to the forefront and join us here. All our presenters, and also Maud and Isabel, our panelists. So we can start our panel discussion. Okay, so for everyone to be able to follow with us on the question, we have questions for our presenters, and we try to link them or group them by affinity, by group of questions that are tackling several aspects about national bibliographies, especially in a broader context. But after every round of question, we can take a question from the audience if they are question in the Q&A or the chat. So I'm going now to share my screen so we can start the panel discussion. Okay. So our first round of questions to the presenters is diving into the wider perspective of national bibliography, and I will start by asking Marian. It's a question for her presentation and for the work of the working group on retrospective bibliographies in CERL. The IFLA National Bibliographic Register that is maintained by the Bibliography section focus on national bibliography. And as we have seen in Marian's presentation, she has some thoughts about that is complementing the work of CERL on retrospective bibliographies, is complementing the work of the IFLA register. We need to know how and what are the retrospective national bibliographies in historical and international perspective. Marian.
Yeah, so the big difference, I think, between the ones that you list on the IFLA site and the ones that we list on the CERL site is that in the list that is available on the IFLA site, we are talking about national bibliographies, and some do, but quite a lot of them don't include historical materials. So many of them start at the time when copyright is implemented in the country and you create these national bibliographies. And the idea of going back in time is quite often a later edition and quite often a separate edition. So we're trying to find out where the national imprint output of a country is recorded. Sometimes that's in the national bibliography, sometimes that's outside of it. And in that sense, the CERL list complements the work, the splendid work that is being done by IFLA. In terms of the historical and international perspective, I think my view is that in retrospective national bibliographies actually also sometimes serve a different purpose. They often function as a way of establishing or affirming a national identity, certainly in areas in Europe where the political landscape has changed a lot and the boundaries have shifted around. It is sometimes a matter of national identity to create your own retrospective bibliography. And that often leads to long questions, long considerations about what to include and what not to include. But from a CERL perspective, these combinations of retrospective bibliographies, which sometimes overlap, give us a window on our shared cultural heritage. It's what binds us together. And if we can get some form of integrated access to these materials, it shows the overlap, but it also shows the wonderful connections between our countries and our intellectual progress as reflected in printing. Thank
you so much, Marian, for this really comprehensive view and insightful, really insightful in many ways. Our question Our next questions will be for Sandra about the ABINIA countries. How do the findings of your study on Latin American countries' legal deposit compare to legal deposit practices in other regions of the world?
The comparison with the legal deposit situation in other regions of the world deserves further research. I have not investigated the situation particularly in other regions of the world because I only focuses in Latin American. But I can say is that the guidance of international organizations such as IFLA or UNESCO are outdated and incomplete. So I consider that my contribution of my proposal of 10 criteria and 23 variables could be a proposal to elaborate new versions of those guidelines. I leave open the possibility that from the IFLA bibliography section, we can work to update the IFLA statement on legal deposit.
Thank you so much, Sandra, about this thought that really open the floor to further work on this and how we can use your research or study to make things more comprehensive in terms of legal deposit law and the work of the National Bibliographic Agency. Our next question will be for Bibliodata, so Anna or Amanda. The national bibliographies typically have stricter selection criteria for inclusion compared to national union catalogs. What are the key challenges and opportunities associated with integrating national bibliographies with a wider portfolio of bibliographic service like Bibliodata?
Hello, good morning. I think so. Bibliodata maintains data on technical and science productions, but the integration of natural bibliographies with unified catalogs, as in case Bibliodata in Brazil, presents a range of various challenges and opportunities, shaping the future of bibliographic information. On the telling, science is the outstanding infrastructure, the limited budget, and the need for standardization, require innovation solutions, and reverse investments.
Anna, can I just stop you to tell you to start from the beginning slowly because you are talking too quickly for the audience to really capture the important things about your talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
To conclusion, I think so. The abilities of Bibliodata is a fully operation. We will look at ways and points in Brazil's future, such national libraries, so on top of the very
the voice is not clear. The voice is not clear, and please talk more slowly.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, and raise your voice. Raise your voice and talk slowly. We
Amanda, can you help me, please?
Sure. The challenge and the opportunity that we have in associated with a cooperation with national bibliographies and the wider portfolio of bibliographic service, it can be some obstacles, as I told you at the slide, like after we did have a lack of investments and also a website infrastructure that did not have did not support new metadata standards. So up to contribute to the with good opportunities, you can say that Bibliodata can be a really relevant source of bibliographic data, and to contribute with the preserves the memory of the Brazilian metadata and the national bibliography.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. So I will stop sharing my screen now so we can ask Maud and Isabel if you have any comments or you have questions from the audience.
Yes, we have two questions in the Q&A box at the moment. One from Juliana. She says, amazing works. Do you think that creating a unified catalog using the data of the national libraries around the world would be a possible or a good way to achieve universal bibliographic control? So I think any of the speaker who is willing to answer this question can do it. It's not addressed to any particular speaker, I guess.
Shall I make a start? So from my perspective, the focus on the National Library is not going to completely cover certainly not in Europe, our imprint, our heritage culture, because a National Library has a very extensive collection, that is absolutely certain, but there are items missing from those collections that are part of what you would like to cover in my case, in a retrospective national bibliography. So it's a good start, but in many of the European countries, there are collaborations with other organizations, academies of sciences, religious institutions that have another part of the national imprint output. And therefore, you need more than just the national libraries to get to a complete mapping of European printed heritage.
Thank you, Marian. Do you personally, Maud, have some thoughts about this?
Not really, no. Thank you.
Isabel? No. Okay. So if you don't have other things to add, our panelists, we can go to the second round of questions.
And sorry, Maud, actually we have another question. So it's from Gerarda Horder, and she's asking, does the Brazilian National Bibliography database use open source software? If yes, what is the software? I understand that Anna and Amanda are not speaking from the National Library, but maybe you can give some comments, please.
Yeah, we don't work at the National Library, and we can't answer you if they use open source service. But and in fact, we do. We think it's very important to use open sources and softwares and everything. So we are responsible to distribute the distribution of the COHUB, which is a free software and it can be installed within every library that wants it. And we have a whole list of open sources, systems, and projects that we involve, but we can't answer for the National Library.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
In addition, I will comment that our program is Python to integrate the register.
Thank you so much, Anna, for this addition. So if we are done with this round of questions, we can go to the second round. So I'm starting to share my screen again. So our second round of question to the panelists will be about bibliographic control. So Marian, in the national retrospective bibliographies are separated databases from libraries catalog, the ISTC and the STCN. Is it a cultural or historical distinction, or their bibliographic treatment is just different from the current national bibliographies that are produced every day and from libraries catalog? What also is the added value of these separate catalogs bibliographically and editorially?
So maybe to start with the first sentence, when you say library catalogs and then ISTC and STCN in brackets, neither of which are library catalogs. So for me, a library catalog is a catalog that is connected to a certain institution which has a certain collection. And in the library catalog, you describe the items in your collection, and you will, for the very distinct purpose of running a library. So you want to know where the book is, you want to know what the state of preservation is, you want to know when you bought it, when it went into the library. So that is separate from a national retrospective bibliography, where some of that information about the imprint information that you record, the title, the author, the place, the year it was printed, it overlaps, is the same in both sets of records. But in a national retrospective bibliography, that is in the context of the heritage of your nation's print production. And therefore, an item can be in several library catalogs, but the same individual title should probably only be in the national retrospective bibliography once. Having said that, if you look at the STCN, in the short title catalog Netherlands, they use something called a fingerprint. And that's a very detailed way of describing the actual item you have in front of you. And then you find that in terms of book history, it becomes really interesting to see that sometimes in the print production process, changes were made to the item, which then are identifiable because of the fingerprint that you can compare to your item. And that means that for book history, a national retrospective bibliography gives the type of information that is really helpful to understand what is happening in your country. As I said in my presentation, what I also find extremely useful about a national retrospective bibliography is that it sort of becomes a backbone. And if we all record the record IDs of those national retrospective bibliographies, ultimately we can identify within our collections where our national imprint is, and also how many copies, for example, have been left over, because you have that way of linking that data. So both serve different purposes. And the problem with our library catalogs is that we want them to be jack of all trades, but they were started as a very, very clear functional thing in our libraries to run our libraries and our collections, monitor our collections. So I think that's what the difference is.
Thank you so much, Marian. That was very informing indeed, very inspiring also for people who would like to start their own, in their countries, their own retrospective national bibliographies. Our second question in this round of question is to Sandra. So how national bibliographic control is carried out in Latin American countries, especially in national bibliographies and union catalog?
Well, the result of my work shows that there is little linkage between the legal deposit legislation and bibliographies. So this is corroborated by the low visibility of ongoing national bibliographies found on the web. Only 6 countries out of the 20 analyzed offer in a rather elementary way national bibliographies with a strong emphasis on bibliographic documentary heritage, thus showing the invisibility of the national production of other types of heritage. So most Latin American national libraries do not make national bibliographies visible in their catalogs, and the few libraries that prepare bibliographies only prioritize textual documents from the International Standard Book Number. This situation merits thinking about the causes or problems that prevent National Library from making progress in the preparation of bibliographies. Possibly, there are many difficulties, from the shortage of human resources to the lack of economic resources. Perhaps the current changes mean that instead of library having to catalog or control everything in the world, we can simply connect system with metadata for different providers and different libraries. I also saw that many guidelines have a pragmatic vision oriented to the data and on the creation and application of bibliographic description standards with a monolithic view of the library community that marks the roles and functions of national bibliographic agencies and the IFLA. For this reason, I can affirm that these principles are more aligned to the past than to the present content or the future of the universal bibliographic control. A situation deserves the opening of collaborative and multidisciplinary debate in pursuit of new version of the principle updated to the current reality. For me, the pragmatic vision of the universal bibliographic control oriented to data and the strict application of bibliographic description standard is confronted with the new version of the new vision of the universal bibliographic control based on a theoretical and conceptual approach that contemplates complexity, data linkage, and international cooperation between the different communities of the bibliographic universe. I agree with the authors Alien and Bordon that they say that the aim is to evolve from the need to control all the world's knowledge to the need to provide universal access to information with connection of libraries and providers.
Thank you so much, Sandra, about this thought. And our third question in this round of questions is for bibliodata. Maintaining consistent bibliographic data standard is crucial for effective information retrieval across national bibliographies and union catalogs. What are the challenges and opportunities for collaboration between the Brazilian National Bibliography and ABIC to achieve this goal? I think that you have covered this in your previous answer to the first question.
Mm-hmm.
So we can pass to the second question about who makes the cataloging and subject access standard in Brazil, what national standards are developed, and which international standards are adopted.
Right. The collaboration between the Brazilian National Library and the Brazilian Institute ABIC to integrate their catalog presents such as system compatibility, harmonization of metadata standards, and the allocation of financial and technical resources. In Brazil, the main reference for access standards by subject are developed and maintained by institutions such as the National Library. And for the most part, Brazilian institutes use cataloging in Anglo-American catalog code. But we are already seeing some initiatives with resource description and access, RDA. The most used exchange format is the machine-readable catalog, Mark 21, which facilitates interoperability and information exchange between libraries and institutions. Through Bibliodata, we are trying to bring data with higher quality and semantics. For this reason, we are developing an ontology based on the library reference model.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for this very informative answer about the standards used in Brazil, whether they are nationally developed or adopted from international standards. And we stop this round of questions to check back with Isabel and Maud if they have any comments from themselves or they have questions from the audience.
We haven't received any other question in the Q&A box at the moment.
Okay.
I
Yes, Isabel.
just want to add an information about what Amanda said. We are in process of translating the resource description access. So many people are studying RDR, so we are very much intent to adopt and to update our catalogs and so on. That's an information.
Thank you so much, Isabel. This is so informing about, yes, bibliographic standard. They need really national translation if they are international standards and to achieve universal bibliographic control. They start by really national translation projects of the international standard, or people cannot adopt it, they cannot understand the stipulation, or it must be easier for them to adopt it and to also accommodate it to their own needs with some adaptation. That is very important. And before we pass to our third and last round of questions to our presenters, Maud, do you like to add anything to about universal bibliographic control, since it was like mentioned, or whatever?
Not especially about UBC, but first of all, I wanted to thank you, all of you, for these very inspiring presentations. And I just wanted to say something to Marian, because I was really delighted to learn more about the work of the CERL Working Group on Retrospective Bibliographies, because last year I was contacted by Chana Algarvio, who has compiled the list of retrospective bibliographies in Europe. And she was seeking for more information about bibliographies of prints in Belgium before 1850. And by that, I mean the geographical region. So it was really great to see the results online and to hear more about it. And work has also progressed from outside at KBR. So KBR had its book holdings before 1700 uploaded into the USTC last year. And this year we had our incunabula described in a collaboration with the STCV. So it's great to hear about your progress from the group of the CERL. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maud. And now I am going to share my screen for the last time, so we can follow on the last round of questions to our presenters. Future perspectives about your projects and about each respective project, or in general. My first question is to Marian. The June 2023 conference on retrospective bibliographies and European print culture up to 1830 sounds like a significant event. What insights and discussion captured during the conference make this publication a valuable resource for the field of retrospective bibliography and maybe of national bibliography in general?
I had written down that for me the biggest takeaway was that they are all very different. Every country has organized its way differently. It has different parameters, and there are differences in who takes the lead. Sometimes it's a national library, sometimes it's a special institution. But actually, after today's presentation and Maud's comment, I'm also going to say that a shared feeling of a mild frustration was a big takeaway. So all of the countries have different building blocks. They have different traditions and different elements already in place, catalogs in national libraries, printed books of bibliographies, and they're all working towards presenting that information together in one place. And that means that although all the countries are different, they're in effect all asking the same questions and facing very similar issues. So what I think the conference has done is brought these people together that are all working on something similar and getting them to communicate and to share their approaches and their frustrations. And then hopefully CERL can play a role in bringing them together. And in the end, we would like to have a comprehensive mapping of our European printed heritage in a way that helps, allows accessing of these records in a way that is useful for our end users. And then we will show our shared heritage in a connected way, I hope. But that's a while off, but we're working towards it.
Thank you so much, Marian, and we're looking forward to receiving this very important publication. And my second question in this round of questions is to Sandra. So your conclusion in your presentation suggests legal deposit captures only a portion of a country documentary heritage in ABINIA's country, in Latin American country. Is it a research assumption, or we can say that the National Library collections in the Latin American countries are indeed currently missing important segments of the national output? And the second part of the question, I want to link this with a thought about retrospective bibliographies from Marian's presentation and talk. How can this gap be addressed to create a more complete picture of each country's retrospective intellectual output? I mean, in the past years, what they have missed about their collection.
Yes, okay. The analysis shows that Latin American national libraries base their legal deposit records and national bibliographies solely and exclusively in two bibliographic identifiers, the International Standard Book Number and the International Standard Serial Number, and to a lesser extent on the International Standard Music Number. These cover only one part of the documentary heritage in Latin America, because I propose in my work a classification of the different types of documentary heritage. And the study shows that there is a lack of I don't know how to say, consideration about the, for example, software heritage, cartographic heritage, graphic heritage, photographic heritage, philatelic heritage, audiovisual heritage that include cinematographic, television, advertising, sounds heritage, radio heritage, and musical heritage.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for this additional information now that is really illuminating other part of your work and your conclusion about the legal deposit practice in ABINIA's countries, and that is also informing to our audience about what to make and how to catch up with what they missed. And our last question in this round and in this webinar is for Bibliodata, for the Bibliodata team. So the PNAX project is intended to modernize bibliographic services at EBICT while managing a wider portfolio of bibliographic services than Bibliodata, which shall include the National Collection Catalog of Serial Publication. So what does this upgrade entails in terms of network management? So the governance of the network, it will be shared still by Bibliodata, or it will go to another institution, and about also what this upgrade entails in terms of standardization in order that you achieve a Brazilian integrated catalog of bibliographic records.
Fine. The PNAX project with Anna and me are part of it. We have an impact on network managed, making integration with different systems as Bibliodata, CCN, and other, it's Comuti, we call it this way. It's about program commutation program, and it would give identity to management and authentication, monitoring and perform security and data protection, standardization for integrated catalog, and also with the unified metadata, we can achieve interchange formats, control the vocabularies and catalog and standards, Therefore, efficient network managed and comprehensive standardization are essential to the success of PNX, guaranteeing integration, security, and data quality.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So I will stop sharing my screen to check for the last time if we have any other question from the audience or other thoughts from Maud and Isabel or our panelists also. They are invited to ask each other questions or whatever, or comment on some of the information that we had today. Is there any final thoughts to be made by any of our panelists? So I must make the conclusion, but before making the conclusion, I am announcing that we will be launching the second track about the new emerging trends in the domain of national bibliographies of our virtual event series in fall this year. Very late in November, we'll announce it like couple of months earlier, so you can save the date. You stay tuned. This time will be something about new technologies as they encounter national bibliographies and what potential they have for the national bibliographic data, and how they can leverage the work of national bibliographies and the national bibliographic agencies. Stay tuned, and we will get back to you about a very first announcement, like around maybe September, when everybody will be coming back from summer vacation. And now, to end this webinar, we are very delighted that we didn't really exceed that time of the webinar. It's just 10 minutes, but the panel discussion was so energizing and so informing. And this brings us to think that national bibliographies are really very fascinating projects, and they can reach endless, they have endless potential. They can reach, if they collaborate and they are in a collective or cooperative project, they can go even further than a national bibliography or just a single project of national bibliography can go. So this was really the theme, the subject, the topic of our webinar for today. We hope that we have covered what we need to cover about these extended views about national bibliographies as they are integrated into a bigger picture, either nationally, regionally, or culturally. And we thank you very much for participating in our webinar and for your attendance. And now we have to leave you to go backstage for our host to end this webinar. Thank you all, and stay tuned. We'll get back to you in September about our second track of the virtual event series, Topics in National Bibliography.